My question is for Dr. Rahm. You know, when I go back to my district, people say, well, why do we not have more supply available and why are we not drilling? What would your response be to average person on the street about what that means? I mean, clearly we have to articulate that what you said earlier about drilling, that those supplies won't be made available for another 20 years. What are some good things that we could be telling our constituents about the reality of what's really happening out there?
Well, I think people need to understand that it is, you know, it took us 2 or 3 decades to get into this mess. Certainly many of us have been urging for quite some time that we need a much more aggressive strategy on fuel efficiency and alternative fuels. I'm not certain that's a lot of comfort to your constituents. I certainly would tell them that in 2006, Congress opened up most of the Gulf of Mexico to drilling. And according to the Energy Information Administration, the Bush administration's own EIA, there's about 41 billion barrels there. And we've found about 7 billion in the last 2 years. Now, the coastal drilling, I don't know what else to call it, because I think the public is confused. They think we're not drilling offshore. We are doing a lot of drilling and exploring offshore. According to the EIA, there's about 18 billion barrels. Which is a lot less than what's in the Gulf. And it should be pointed out that of the 18 billion that the moratorium applies to, 10 billion is off of California. And I think if we left it up to the state of California, we wouldn't be doing any drilling. So we're not talking about much oil, and I think the notion that if we opened up 40 billion barrels in 2006 to be drilled, and since then oil prices have doubled, the possibility that if you ended the moratorium to a lot less oil, anything would happen to oil prices is absurd. And I think it is incumbent upon political leaders like yourself to just give the public straight talk. I understand that the higher oil prices are, the more people believe, hey, we should drill more. We are drilling flat out. We have been, and I'm sure you have the statistics, the Congress, the White House has been opening up land onshore and offshore for drilling.
I wanted to change the subject a little bit. We talk about gearing up for renewable energy, new technologies. We had a bill signed into law by the President last year, our energy bill that included the Green Jobs Act. Can you give me some insight there about how this plays into getting our dependency off of fossil fuels and what that means? And maybe also Mr. May could talk a little bit about that too, because of your industry and how you are driven and how this transition may impact your area. So very quickly.
Sure. Well, I think it's very clear. This year, we're going to send $700 billion. American consumers are going to spend $700 billion overseas to purchase oil. And as T. Boone has said, there's no prospect that number is going to be lower for the next 10 years. That's going to be $7 trillion. Obviously, it would make a great deal of sense to spend money in this country on plug-in hybrids, wind power, solar photovoltaics, energy efficiency, and keep the money in America paying people to do insulation, to build better cars, et cetera, than to send trillions of dollars overseas. So that is
the criticism we get, though, if I could just quickly say, is that we're actually going to decrease the number of jobs here at home. So that's an argument that is being used by the other side of the aisle against us now, that if we reinvest, it's going to take away from those jobs that currently exist.
Well, we're importing almost, about 2/3 of our oil. So $700 billion out of, let's say, $1 trillion we're going to spend on oil this year is just going to go to Saudi Arabia. It's just going to go to Venezuela. It's going to go to Russia. It's going to create jobs in those countries. I don't see how that $700 billion can do anything for Americans. If we could spend a couple $1 trillion over the next 10 or 20 years, invest in this country, and then reduce that from $700 billion to a couple $100 billion, we'd be bringing back $500 billion each year, keeping it in this country. I just think it makes obvious sense that is the way to economic health and well-being.
Mr. May, just quickly, I know my time's run out.
I think that two quick points to make. Number one, the aviation space, the aviation sector feels that being environmentally sound is in its own best interest for one very simple reason. We are totally carbon intensive right now in terms of our fuel, and so the less we burn, the more environmentally friendly we're going to be, and we are desperate to spend less money on fuel in whatever way we can. Next generation air traffic control, winglets, we can go down a long list of things that we're working on.
I'd love to hear more about what that cost would mean or investment that would be made.
We'll be happy to provide that to you.
Thank you.